the time is now because, one, our poverty is just too high, right? First principles thinking, that is the thing we should solve. Let's solve for that. And then, I promise you many other things will get better.
From the new home of Bitcoin and all things blockchain, Peckham, South London, this is the Genesis Block Education Podcast, and I'm your host, of course, Bitcoin by Malks. Guys, welcome back to our latest episode. How's everybody been? I hope everybody's been well. So I've just returned from holiday, spent some time in sunny West Wales. Amazing, back-to-back sunshine. Literally just returned back to London to showers. London's flood. I think the risk of London flooding is actually probably underestimated. There was 2 days max of rainfall and literally London was semi-underwater, but we can't joke about these things. I think there's a number of countries going through similar incidents. I think Germany as well, and the Rhineland, and some other places across the world. So yeah, some people will say it's global warming or other things. Just be mindful, I guess. Anyway, what's been happening in the Bitcoin world? You know what? I've missed a lot. I've kind of tried in the last week to stay off of Twitter. To be quite honest, I was in such a remote part of Wales that my reception and my Wi-Fi was terrible, so I didn't think I had a choice. But one thing that did kind of blow my phone up was #ETH. Kal Kassa will explain what happened later in this podcast, but #ETH was everywhere, and I think it was a bit of a sly on Ethereum. It was also a shout out to the people of Ethiopia as well by Jack Dorsey, who's obviously the Twitter owner. So that was interesting. What else has happened? The news or the rumor, should I say, of Amazon to start taking Bitcoin payments was apparently leaked, but then it just turned out to be a big pile of doo-doo. But inadvertently, the Bitcoin price, I think, has responded positively to that news. Obviously, there's going to be other price drivers driving the Bitcoin price, but there's life in the old dog yet. Let's get onto the podcast. The title of today's podcast is Ethiopia and Bitcoin, and this is the first of a two-part series. So Kal Kassa, my guest today, describes himself as a Bitcoiner, but he also has a career in advisory and is also one of the leading proponents for Bitcoin adoption in the country of Ethiopia. So I came across Kal reading his article in Bitcoin magazine. I'll share the links in the show notes, but his article is called The Marathon, Bitcoin and Ethiopia. Kal is a great guy, great personality. So he was only happy to come on. So we appreciate you. So with Kal, we're going to discuss about Bitcoin in Ethiopia. And in the second part, we'll focus more on Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. Now, this is the first time that we're going to talk about the Lightning Network on this podcast. So I'm really looking forward to the second podcast. The Lightning Network is going to be a massive game changer in how people use Bitcoin, how people see Bitcoin, and how people transact in Bitcoin across the globe. So for me, that's a really important episode for people to tune into and learn. As always, please like, share, comment. Please check out my website, which is bitcoinbymalks.com. And also for the newbies to Bitcoin, check out our course, which is now on Udemy. So guys, I'll catch you on the other side. And without further ado, it's over to you, Kal Kassa. Kal Kassa, how is your day? How are you doing today? What's happening? Where are you? Where are you based?
So I'm in Austin, Texas, and my day is beautiful. I mean, the weather here, it's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's pretty hot.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's nice. There's some nice lakes and rivers and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm doing well. I mean, I think past 3 days, it might have, I think the market is kind of treating Bitcoin well, and on the news and the media and everybody's been nice to me lately, so that's really really
actually
nice.
And I think that's down to this ETH #ETH that's
Yes.
So just a little bit about me. So I've been in the countryside. I don't know how to explain to an American, but there's a part of the UK called Wales, and so it's mostly country. So I've been away and had really bad reception, really bad access to internet. But this hashtag ETH has been everywhere, and I've been like, what's going on? And that's why I was just like, listen, I've got this interview podcast with Kal Kassa. I've timed it perfectly. I've timed it perfectly.
Yeah.
How did that start? Tell me what happened, because I just so oblivious.
So I was taking a nap, and then I look at my phone and I see that Jack Dorsey has tweeted hashtag ETH and then the Ethiopian flag, right? And so, at this point, Jack Dorsey has been very supportive of Ethiopia. So I didn't think anything of it. I just kind of like, all right, you tweeted the Ethiopian flag. Like, that's great, So I think I liked it, retweeted it, and then, went about my night. And then I started seeing all of the others flood in. And then there was news of like the Olympic, Twitter account. They also supported and say, oh, thank you for talking about Ethiopia.
Oh, the Ethiopian Olympic team.
Correct. So it was all kind of tied to the Olympic season, and the hashtags were being given out to different groups, and so again, I didn't think anything of it, and then it just started piling in, and so many more supporters from across the world, and then of course there was the kind of the joke with Ethereum. So. Yeah, I think it was a fun day for everyone. So, if you didn't have fun, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, definitely. And as I was saying, so to me, it was perfect timing for this podcast. And today on this podcast, we are talking about Ethiopia and Bitcoin. And there's two massive words in that sentence. And before we get into it, actually, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my name is Kal Kassa. I guess now the best title I can call myself is Bitcoiner. I've tried on so many other like titles, and that one is the one that works, Yeah. And I've just been involved in sharing the good word about Bitcoin to the Ethiopian community, partly because that's my home, much like you, that's kind of where I've been building my work and my business. And then also because, that's, my mother tongue is Amharic. So, okay. Translating as many materials as I can to the Amharic language and others, and then sharing that. So that's kind of been my background with Bitcoin. But, I was involved in advisory for a number of years. I studied political science at Chapman University. I grew up in San Jose, California.
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of my childhood background, and moving to Ethiopia or to the United States at the age of 3. So again, much like you, raised abroad, and but really interested in the Ethiopian economy, and Bitcoin really makes sense for so many reasons. The inflationary bits and all that good stuff apply to Ethiopia very well.
So how's Austin, Texas? Because I'm hearing it starting like a lot like Wyoming, starting to become quite a Bitcoin hub. Are you starting to feel that energy build in that part of the world?
Absolutely. I mean, there's there's a meetup every month. Yeah. There are kind of sideline events, and there are probably great offices here that are innovating on top of Bitcoin, and and it'll kind of lead us into our second conversation of Lightning and all of the players in Lightning. But yeah, the community has shaped up really well, and I'm really fortunate to be a 10-minute drive from the epicenter of that.
So tell us your Bitcoin story, because everybody's got a Bitcoin, how they first found Bitcoin story. What's your one?
Well, the first time I found it, I gave it right back because, my roommate was trying to tell me about it.
Yeah.
I didn't listen. And then years went by. So
what year are we talking? How long ago are we talking?
This is 2013. So probably a year or two before I left college. And yeah, it was, yeah, of course, it hadn't done everything that it's done in
Of course,
the 12 cents since inception. So at the time, it was just novel and cool. And then recently, it just became a necessity. As I was moving about different countries and currencies, it just became like, all right, let me get something that I can transfer at, the speed of light. And, Bitcoin was actually that. And then it actually became the speed of light when I learned about the Lightning Network and exactly how fast and instant those payments are. And, the way the confirmation works and all this, it just really was well suited for my business. So I was like, all right, let me adopt this for my business. And then during that time, right, the price increased. So I was kind of, or I guess the better way to phrase that is, the dollars continue to devaluate, right?
Yeah, of course.
and the Ethiopian birrs and the naira and all of these currencies, just over a period of time, they're going to go south. So yeah, I think I got in at a really lucky spot. It's unfortunate because I've met a few people here, and I think back in 2017 they were a part of a. They got wrecked, right? I think that's the term. They lost a lot of money, right? And they're still recovering from that, right? And so I'm really glad I'm not associated with a lot of that history, right? It would have been a great learning lesson, but I came in during a bear market. Nothing was really going on, and then it spiked, and then I had all of these amazing learning resources. So yeah, it's been a very interesting, year and a half.
Yeah, I find bear markets are best for learning about Bitcoin. In the bull markets, there's just so much going on, and as you say, people get wrecked. So you definitely came in at the right time. The title of today's podcast is Ethiopia and Bitcoin. And let's talk a little bit more about Ethiopia. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Growing up in the UK, Ethiopia first came to my consciousness, obviously, during the 80s. There was sort of thing, Live Aid, and the images which were constantly shown of the famine that occurred during the mid-80s. It wasn't until later in my life that I just actually got sort of exposed to the history, the wealth, the richness in the culture of Ethiopia. Even my wife, or wife to be, she lived in Ethiopia for a year, Addis. So she always says,
Nice.
we've got to go to Addis. So it's been on our to-do list for a couple of years. But when you go onto the African continent, you get to really experience some of these countries, and Ethiopia is. The history is so deep, going back to sort of ancient Egypt all the way to Queen of Sheba, right on through history. So I just want you to give kind of an overview of, Ethiopia historically, where the country is politically and economically, because a lot of the listeners have never been there or may have preconceived ideas about the country. If you can just really kind of give a view of the people, the culture.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, that's it's such a good chance to talk about Ethiopia from a historic perspective, which a lot of people never really get a chance to do, because I would say the trending image of Ethiopia for the past 30 years has been famine, from the 80s. And those are famines that continue to go on. I mean, a lot of those bottlenecks and cultural kind of waves of supply and demand shocks and all of these things still happen. So, our country has such a beautiful history, and the moment you pull back the calendar, it's you can go into some of the Queen of Sheba history. My kind of passion for the past 6 months has been diving into the past century or two, and looking because Ethiopia is so vast. There's so many ethnicities. They're different. Their entire different recounts of history. I'll read one analysis, and then somebody else will say, that has it on its head. So it's been a very interesting assignment to learn about its history, but it is wide and full and rich with resource and amazing achievement. I've really been looking into some of the Haile Selassie eras, which started 1913 or so.
Yeah,
and the different money movements that were going on, just because that's so tied to Bitcoin and the thesis of better money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then of course just me personally, my work is so much in media and like marketing, that I'm trying to see if there's a connection between all of the beautiful wealth of history and bring that to real value for Ethiopia. So one of the best ways is sharing our culture and hoping that like your wife, we have tourists come in and we have people that really appreciate and take care of these histories. And also, this is probably a good place to note that a lot of the historical artifacts of the kind of Ethiopian monarch and such don't actually, they're not in Ethiopia at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
So they were stolen during the time.
Yeah.
And they kind of make a bit of a mockery, because every now and then they'll loan us back a piece.
What's that about?
It's like the best theft ever. It's an ongoing open air crime. And the Albert and Victoria Museum and this, that, the other, there are many of them. I don't want to like single anyone out, but there are a lot of museums that just have our stuff. And it's unfortunate that they appreciate our history and are caretakers of our history.
But just think about that for a minute. Someone breaks into your house. It's just mad. It's such a white elephant in the room that the whole world, it's just like the CFA in sort of the French African countries is like, are we serious? Are we really still doing this? Like, you rob people, and I don't even want to go into it. Sorry for cutting you off, but it just
and it's how easy it is to rug pull and
rug pull. That's
steal from people, because I come from Ethiopia, right? It's not the safest place to live, right? I've been in some alleys where I don't want to be in.
Yeah, cool.
And so, but I actually, that type of theft, when it's man to man, right, or however it comes, that's okay, because there are two faces and there are two,
Mm-hmm.
But when you are a country and you essentially go into a computer terminal, add a few zeros somewhere, and that completely destroys the value of another country's currency, like it just sounds like it's beyond. It's systematic at that point.
Yeah, totally. No, we will talk about that a bit more, but just tell us a bit more about sort of the current political regime in Ethiopia. Is the country, would you call it stable? Because I just looking back myself personally, and obviously I'm from the outside looking in, there was a new president who came in. He wasn't from any of the sort of major tribes. He was Muslim as well. And I might be wrong in saying that Ethiopia is largely a Christian country, but I know it has a really sort of deep Christian roots, and at one point was the center of the early Christian world. How is the country politically at the moment?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you mentioned an interesting thing there. Like, Abiy coming in, I was there at the time, and I had a chance to live on the main road, on Airport Road. So, every time there's a procession, that's the road, because they're coming to and from the airport. So it was a great year of jubilation.
Okay.
And I think I think there's and also as a leader, I've heard him speak a few times, and I think he embodies a lot of different cultural elements. So I think you're right. Half of his family background is Muslim, I want to say, and then I believe he's Protestant, but
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
yeah. So but again, like he really represents I think Ethiopia, which is very diverse kind of landscape, right? And yeah, I mean, I think you've seen in news of late that Ethiopia is going through its growing pains, and yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot about the kind of the political conversation that I'm just not attuned to.
Okay.
Partly because one, I'm not an Amharic, that's not my first language, so there's a lot of gray area that might not be clear to me. Yeah. So I definitely have seen it, from a first-hand perspective. Mm-hmm. But I really never left the capital, Addis Ababa, right?
Right.
So if you go to Addis Ababa, it'd probably be similar to a lot of the cities you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. But then when you kind of leave the capital city, then it becomes a different story, right?
Yeah,
in terms of everything. So so yeah, I think for me, my experience in Addis Ababa might not be reflective of everybody else's experience.
Yeah.
But I think Ethiopia has kind of great direction, and if we're able to solve some of the inflationary ills,
right?
I don't know if you had a chance to see Dr. Abiy, the Prime Minister's speech. He gave a speech to his parliament about, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was in Amharic, and my Amharic is quite strong. Yeah. And I picked up the word Yoaga Gishpat, which means inflation. Oh. And he said that word more than 30 times, less than 35 times. I tried to count, and then I lost the number. It's like a 2-hour speech, maybe hour and a half, 2 hour. And so, he really, and it's a wonderful, address. If I can get you maybe the translated version.
Sure.
But it seems clear that, on top of all of the other, diplomatic and they're building a dam. So it's very, resource intensive. There's a lot of policy conversations with neighboring countries.
With Egypt. Yeah.
It's so on top of all of that, there's also the question of, okay, what's happening to our Ethiopian birr? What's happening to the United States dollar? And thankfully they're having the Bitcoin conversation. So it's a tough conversation to have, but
really?
they're talking. Yeah, I mean it's early like dive, but Commercial Bank of Ethiopia had produced a document about 3 or 4 years ago. Okay. So I think they're going to start implementing some of those actions, recommendations, things. There's so many people involved. It's hard to guess, but yeah, I have a positive note.
So just pegging back to the inflation conversation. So can you give us an example of how bad the inflation is at the moment? What's typical of inflation on an annual basis in Ethiopia?
So the government numbers, I think, are around 15%. They might say 20%. Wow. I think in practice, we're looking at 20 to 30%. I mean, it's really because I don't have the of course the Western unions and all of this have the exact, the data and World Bank and all of these bodies would probably know much more. But yeah, it seems to just be inflated at quite a bit. And I know this because when I moved there in 2013, 2014, a holiday lamb, like, the sheep that you buy for the holidays, was about 1,500 birr, right? And I think it comes out to like $40 in those prices. And now those, the same, holiday ham or lamb would go for 5,000 to 7,000 birr. Wow. And I think that comes out to, in today's dollars, 50 or 60 USD. And so, no, I'm sorry. It comes out to 100 and some change. So you'll see that, it increased quite a bit. And I'm forgetting the numbers, but I had written about this a while ago. And yeah, inflation is tough. It's tough to calculate and it's tough to live under.
It is.
And the problem is not everyone's, I was very fortunate, you can, as a business person, you can increase your prices, right? But as what if you have a government job, right? Where prices don't increase every, 6 months or 3 months, right? So it could be very tough for the majority of people,
And is that inflation largely down to money printing and sort of poor monetary policy by the Ethiopian government, or are there external factors that drive that inflation?
Well, it's very tough because if you're in the position of the, Ethiopian government and you're given a blank check from the World Bank for, $200 million for some assignment, and you have to spend it in this, region, or you have to do X, Y, and Z, you're not in a position to say no to that, because okay, you might have a long-term thesis, but in the short term, politically, you can't do that. Diplomatically, you can't do that. You have UN staff on the other end that are waiting for their payroll, right, to clear the next month. So there's an entire economy built off of aid and dependency from these guys. So, it's not as, yes, there's a bigger kind of web, and so that leads to it all. But yeah, unfortunately, the monetary policy, there's a lot of actors and pressure on it. And so Ethiopia can't make sovereign decisions, I'm sure everyone has really good intentions, but, those incentives, start harming.
Misaligned. Oh, totally.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, no, totally. So we had a similar conversation with Ray Youssef at Paxful, and he kind of really exposed what we don't see in terms of the challenges decision makers are under, especially in African governments. And sometimes we don't think about it, and we always seem to think a lot of these governments are corrupt, but actually their hands are tied on a lot of these decisions, and it's unfortunate. So one thing I really want to ask you about is capital flows, as in money and the freedom of movement inside and outside the borders of Ethiopia. Can you send money out of Ethiopia and within it, or is it pretty, with some, I guess my conversation with Ray again to bring that up is, we looked at it, and I guess some of these African countries can be looked at as economic prisons in terms of the way the way just resources are just kept inwards. So is that something that Ethiopia is a victim of as well?
Absolutely. And it's a prison, and the only way to get out is by paying more money. So it's like, okay, you can move this money, but it'll cost you 20%, and wow. And it feels like theft, right? Because it's your money, and and then of course just being debased over a period of time because of inflation. So it really could feel that way. And I know, Ray Youssef, he does, he runs a large organization, right?
Yeah, of course.
I can't imagine the amount of buys and sell that happen within his kind of trading offices, right? And all of the compliance activities that happen, right? I read of one of the exchanges in Africa. I'm forgetting their name. I think it was BitPesa. And they were saying something like 35% of their expenses are compliance related, just like, dotting and signing papers and things that, are bureaucratic and don't serve exactly. And so
value adding, they're not really value adding, are they at all? Right.
30% of their, expenses go towards that. And so, me, I'm a simple, a simple businessman, right? My numbers are much easier to, I can sleep at night. You know what I mean? Yeah. If there was a devaluation that occurred, in the near future, I might be okay because of my privileges, right? I have dollar, I have this, I have that. But for someone with an Ethiopian passport and all of the foreign pressures on our banking system, it could very well feel like a financial or debtor's prison.
So, unless you've been hiding under a rock recently, you may have heard about this thing called Bitcoin. Bitcoin is everywhere at the moment, with people saying it's one of the most important inventions of the 21st century. If, like many people, you're still not sure or haven't got a clue what all the fuss is about or where to start on your learning journey, Genesis Block Education has the course for you. The Bitcoin Basics Beginners course is now available on Udemy. It's packed full of lectures, activities and easy to follow resources which will give you the fundamental knowledge on what Bitcoin is, what makes it so valuable, and most importantly, how to obtain and secure it. If you want more information, please see the show notes or visit us at bitcoinbymalks.com, the Bitcoin Basics course. Without Bitcoin, there is no cryptocurrency.
I want to refer to your article and the one that you wrote for Bitcoin magazine. And it was a brilliant article and such an eye-opener. And that was the marathon, Ethiopia and Bitcoin. And that's really kind of what's underpinning this podcast. And I guess as a subheading, you said Ethiopia is primed to embrace Bitcoin culturally and economically. Why do you believe now is a time for Bitcoin in Ethiopia?
Now because one, I think we're as poor as we're going to get. So I mean, I don't think we need any more case studies to tell us that we need a better. Yeah, like we know we need to do something better, and so and thank you for highlighting that article.
Make sure you read it. Anybody listen to this, make sure you read that article. Great article.
Thank you. And I try to capture it in the title, the marathon. If you're, the time is now because, one, our poverty is just too high, right? First principles thinking, that is the thing we should solve. Let's solve for that. And then, I promise you many other things will get better. And so I think technology wise, connection wise, Ethiopia has some of its infrastructure in place now better than, 5-10 years ago. So the 25% of Ethiopia is now connected, to the internet. Right. And so, if we can, incentivize them to, use Bitcoin, learn about Bitcoin, then I think the time is just perfect for that. Maybe 3 years ago when there was kind of that weird ICO bubble and, people didn't really know what was going on. Maybe we could have said at that point it was too early for countries like Ethiopia to adopt. Mm-hmm. Now, I think, with all of the media attention, there's a state minister, His Excellency Ahmadine Mohammed, at the Ministry of, I think it's Innovation and Technology. And so he's looking over to our Twitter conversations, right. And, I'm sure he takes, a few hours a week and just says, okay, what are these, Bitcoin kids up to, So a few years ago, we didn't have that guy there. But now he's more senior and he's been, invited to some great stages, and forums. So as long as he keeps looking over at us and we keep developing on it, we expand, through Lightning and some other instant channels, then I think, the time is really now.
Okay, so speaking about the man or woman in the street, let's dive down a little bit into what day-to-day problems that Bitcoin solves for the normal person. So, remittance, is that something that is really big in Ethiopia, and how can Bitcoin be used to resolve that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the remittance market is, depending on which data you want to look at, anywhere, $1 to $5 billion. I've heard so many numbers. I don't know what to believe, but it's a huge amount, especially globally. But in Ethiopia, that's the case. And so you have, families sending small amounts, a few hundred, a few $1,000s to support their family for the holidays, right? Usually the type of transactions we're looking at. And so right there, if someone sends $100, about 7 to 14 of those dollars are never going to make it to that family member, and then two, it takes time, right? So there's a clearing, transaction, and payment process that needs to occur. There might be some other liens and holds, or PayPal, this or that you can't really account for, but it might happen during the transaction. And then there in Ethiopia itself, I think beyond the remittance, it works well as a unit of account, because our Ethiopian birr really hasn't been our unit of account. The US dollar has taken that.
Oh, right.
At least mentally, when we're building contracts and invoices, not physically.
Right.
So it would solve that issue. A better store of value, obviously, right? You're not going to hold gold in your pockets or in your home, but you can have a little cell phone, right?
Yeah.
And then of course it's a great, medium of exchange. So I could send somebody 20 cents or 10 cents or $10,000, right, of Bitcoin instantly. And it's all the same process. And there's, no third party, and it's peer to peer. And I think, it's difficult because talking to the average person in Ethiopia, the average person has so many concerns, and, they're going to try to make it, to the bus stop before it starts raining, they're just too busy. So it's a matter of slow adoption, and, and I think it'll get there. It's going to take some time,
Okay.
It's gonna take that Ethiopian time to get there.
African
it's gonna trickle in, but once it does take hold, I'm very confident. 6 months ago, if you were talking to me, I would have been like, you know what, Malcolm, it's never gonna happen. Like Ethiopia, it's they're not listening. They'll never adopt it. They're looking at it like criminal activity. Today, I've had really good conversations with really senior people, right? Public sector, private sector.
Wow.
And they're even adopting open source, which is usually like a taboo. Like, let's share our data. And I mean, at least that's what they're telling me, right? So
they're sweet talkers, these governments. They're real
they've been nice to me. We'll see if they're nice to everyone. But some good strides have been made. So I'm if we can do that in the next 6 months, then I think it's going to be good roads for everyone.
So I guess with Bitcoin, as powerful as it is quite disruptive. So we're talking about a non-inflationary, incorruptible, immutable, censorship-resistant. Do the government fear it, or are they now embracing? Are they open to this disruption?
You have dissenting views too. I wouldn't paint everyone in the same bucket. And so there are some excellent LinkedIn threads as of like 3 days ago, where you have really top consultants in Ethiopia saying, I think a buddy of mine is one of those. He posted really a funny photo of Bruce Lee. And he's just like, all right, what do we do with this? And so this is LinkedIn, this is Twitter, this is directly to some of those people in power. And so as long as we're having that conversation, I don't think it's anything to be afraid of, because it's not going to go anywhere. So you might just learn and make yourself ready for anything that comes. So I think the Ethiopian government, I don't know if they're going to be afraid of it. They're probably just going to prepare. They'll prepare for it, and hopefully they'll do the best thing, which is have it on their balance sheets, have it in a sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, the Twitter community has been so helpful. There was, I think his name is Stackle Moore, 1971. And he responded to the state minister. And he was like, "Oh, I saw that you're raising funds for the dam. They're building a dam."
Yeah, of course, the dam. Yeah, I've heard about it. Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, I saw the website. Why don't we go to, is it BTC server or adding that API that allows you to take Bitcoin?" Yeah. So he was, they were kind of sending him links and screenshots and ways of doing it, for free, right? I mean, it wasn't a closed contract or anything. It was really open source. You have a state minister given technical, computer, programming advice by non-paid, ninjas on Twitter. Like it was mind blowing to me, like in real time, the learning was happening. Like he asked and it happened, right? Now, all the, the host of that website has to do is plug in the API, plug in the bank account at the back, on whatever domicile or country it belongs to, and Ethiopia can raise more money for its dam. It can raise it in Bitcoin, it can raise it in dollar, and so like it's these real-time solutions that I think will have us accelerate kind of the innovation that's going on.
Cool. So the telecom and the internet connectivity within Ethiopia, from my knowledge, is pretty poor, right? Do you have any numbers that's around that? I heard it is pretty poor. I think it's something like 70 million Ethiopians. That's going to be a major stumbling block, right? And
that's right. I mean, and because it's the biggest bottleneck that we have. It's really the only challenge that we have. And it's why the Ethiopian government has been working with, outside investors, bringing them in. There have been some procurements for the telecom
on the infrastructure, on the telecoms infrastructure of the country.
Absolutely. Right. So there is, now it's going to take some time for that to trickle in and, have more adoption and infrastructure built out, but it's happened, so, and once the government starts moving, you can't really stop the train, it just keeps going. So it's better now. I mean, during my times there, I just remember, I would have to schedule around it. So I knew that there was better upload, download speeds in the evening, like late evening, after 10, 11 p.m., because everybody goes to sleep.
Wow.
So I would do all of my, updates and, this and that and the other during night, because I was assured consistent, internet. And then, there are times, especially I think after lunchtime, where you do not want to be online, it's because everybody's like coming back, having their coffee break, going on Instagram. Exactly. They're doing their thing. And it just, so you just have to work around it. I wish there were more availability for like satellite and all these, things that we have in the States. And you in the UK, I think Starlink might be a solution, or something like Starlink, in the near future. I think it's really going to take one or two, good big players to do this well. And then we'll have, a ton more connection in Ethiopia.
So what about low-hanging fruit like education in local languages? Is there a shortage of Bitcoin education in local languages? And what can the Bitcoin community do to kind of help there?
Yeah. So, I mean, this past weekend was amazing, right? So most of Twitter now understands that ETH refers to Ethiopia, the country.
Right. Not Ethereum, not Vitalik.
I wouldn't know exactly. So, things like social media, I mean, it sounds so simple, but, things like GitHub, things like, funny memes on Twitter are going to educate an entire, billion or so people, and then when you can translate it, make it a little funny and in the local context, it's gonna be amazing. It is amazing. I mean, what educators like yourself are doing, what people like Ray are doing. They're creating entire economies out of Bitcoin, right? It's amazing to see every country develop at its own pace, and also Ethiopia has an advantage because we're a little late to the game. We're like, I don't know, a few months, right, late to the game. And we're watching all of these countries take different steps, right? So El Salvador is doing it this way. India is having a CFIT, they're all, China, took out the dula, which is like, it's a weapon, and so there are different ways of dealing with it. And so Ethiopia should learn from everybody else. And, I'm learning too. So anything that I'm thinking, I post, but that's a part of the learning process, so everything is in real time. And so education has a lot to go. And there are fantastic schools in Ethiopia. There are, so many, there's a, huge public drive to educate as many people. Literacy rates have been going up. All of the good numbers, right? So, it's okay. I think Ethiopians will have a chance to learn about this better money and implement it. And then, hopefully we can, begin to solve around it and go from there.
So how critical is having 70% of the population under the age of 27 to your vision of Bitcoin in Ethiopia?
Yeah, that's the most amazing number. So you can either treat it, it could be scary because they're young and impressionable, and they can easily start throwing rocks at any time. And this isn't, specific to just Ethiopia. A lot of countries are dealing with, huge populations and huge, dissent and things like that. So, how do we educate our 75%? That's going to be, the most basic question.
What do you see as the road ahead, or I guess the next steps for Ethiopia and Bitcoin on that journey for mass adoption? What are the immediate next steps that Ethiopia have to make as a nation?
Love it. Immediate next steps is like my middle name. I have a little website I've been developing, bitcoinbear.org, and on the bottom there's a timeline of activities. And one of them, you have to dig a little bit. But X, Y, and Z, you gotta make your time count, And what they need to do now is, I think they know, just from my conversations these past few weeks. But so something on their timeline is the launch of Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, right? And so they're kind of planning all of that now. And now, of course, the bank has a huge history of existing and doing very well, and creating all of these financial products for Ethiopians. But now they're actually launching their headquarters, their new building, their kind of flagship for Africa, right? And Ethiopia is on the track, right? If it can solve, again, some of its inflationary and cost-inducing headaches. If it can solve a lot of that, it's on the path to become not only like the diplomatic capital, but also a financial capital, right? And of course, playing a supporting role to all of the other big economies, but also standing on its own and saying, look, we really have a lot of resources to offer, right? We should be valued at better amounts, right? Simply speaking. And so the moment Commercial Bank does that, and it's going to happen real soon, the building is like 98% done. And the moment they have they're going to call it a committee or some sort of steering group. And once they start diving into this issue, having Bitcoin on their balance sheets, learning more about it and sharing it with their populace, then it's naturally going to, do what it does, which is fixed value and correct for inflation.
Okay, so just as a personal question to you, where do you see Bitcoin by the end of the year? Now, I don't like talking about the Bitcoin price, but I think it's just like I ask people about how they got into Bitcoin. I think this is a question I'm going to ask people till we get to the end of the year. So where do you see us for the Bitcoin price at the end of the year, and let's just say the next 5 years?
So I am the least math-oriented or technical person. So I'm not going to give you a number, but I will say that whatever number it's at, everyone is going to be really happy with it.
Yeah.
And we will see that whatever number it's at, it will continue to prove the thesis and be more valuable. And there'll be more learning that goes on. And there will be major kind of news items that happen because of Bitcoin. And I mean, numbers wise, that could mean, many things. It could mean a huge range, so many variables. There might be a car guy that just, gets on Twitter and says something about Bitcoin, right? and that's things that have happened, right?
Yeah.
And so those short-term shocks, they're not going to mean as much, but the long-term price, it's really that action.
Thanks for listening to the first part of this 2-part podcast with Kal Kassa, where we've been discussing Ethiopia and Bitcoin. In the next podcast, we'll be discussing Ethiopia and the Lightning Network. Now, if you'd like to get in contact with Kal Kassa, read any of his articles, or follow bitcoinbird.org, please check the show notes. As per usual, check out our website, bitcoinbymalks.com, and for the Bitcoin beginners, please check out our Bitcoin Basics course live on Udemy. This is the Genesis Block Education Podcast. I'm Bitcoin by Malks, and I'll see you next time.